He sets the standard for beauty and excellence in that garden. And then we as farmers should pursue that excellence. So, parable of the talents, the last idea in terms of a biblical worldview of agriculture. You remember the parable of the talents? One gentleman was given 5 talents, the other 2 talents, the other 1 talent. What did the gentleman with the 1 talent do? He buried his talent in the ground. He came back to the one who gave him the talent. Did he receive a positive response from his boss? No, he didn't. And when we think about the landscapes of Africa, and as a farmer, do we think of our land as a talent that has been given to us by our Savior, entrusted to our care? And we need to ask this question, what if Jesus came to visit my farm today? Would I have to run off my farm, go into my house, roll out the red carpet, prepare the best possible refreshments to welcome Jesus to my farmstead? Or is Jesus the kind of man who would walk out into the field with you and ask you, where's another hoe, so that I can work with you side by side in taking the weeds out of your garden? That's the kind of man Jesus is, right? He's not going to sit back and expect this lavish set of refreshments. But as Jesus comes out onto that field, we as farmers need to recognize this is the master of the universe. This is the person that I am held accountable to if I call myself a Christian. He is my Lord. What is he going to say when he sees my farm? Is he going to sit back and think to himself, well done, good and faithful servant? Because I've been a good steward? That's the calling we should be pursuing. So, a biblical worldview transforms people. God is the one who transforms people through his word. Here's an example of a gentleman who went through one of our seminars from the Nairobi Great Commission School. He said, this is a refreshing aspect of the gospel that can truly transform our future, both spiritually and physically. It should be taught everywhere. It has an impact. It also transforms not only the minds of people, but it can transform the land that sustains those people. Here is a very brief summary of some of the results that we gathered from a post-conference evaluation that we did about 6 months after one of our big conferences. And those who responded, these were just some of the figures we got. 29% of them took action by speaking or preaching or organizing a seminar on this topic for their church. 16,000 trees were planted according to the people that responded to the evaluation. And 15 new tree nurseries were started as a result of a newfound vision and understanding for stewardship. Farming God's way. It's another component of our work with farmers in Kenya. And what does it essentially mean when we say farming God's way? Another way you could characterize it is saying farming as God intended in terms of the quality of stewardship. Basically, in a nutshell, uplifting the hungry, fighting drought, and discipling people into a biblical worldview of farming. Transforming people and their land. Here is a woman who went through some of our discipleship classes on farming, and this is what she had to say about it. Since I started attending the discipleship classes, I've changed my worldview. I've changed my perspective on farming. I used to hate farming. Remember the bottom of the ladder? I used to hate farming, but now I love it and I dream about it every day. There's a change in worldview. This gentleman said something very similar. I've now learned that we have completely left God out of our farms. God is so distant from our farming thinking. How distant is he? Or is he actually a centerpiece in how we think about agriculture? We've left God out of our farms. Your teaching has opened my heart to realize that we have strayed from God's will, and I know God is calling us back to the garden. We claim to have faith, but we have not been practicing it. So he recognizes a brand new dimension of his Christian life that he can now practice. This gentleman, I've never seen such good crops growing on this land. Please come and teach me how to do farming God's way. Daniel Mbugua. So once farmers see the hope that there is a way in which they can improve the productivity of their farms, all of a sudden, their whole mentality can be changed, and the whole community can be changed to become better stewards of that land, to put more food on the plates for their children's sake. Here is just one example of how farming God's way can be so dramatically different than the conventional way of farming. On the left is the technique that we use with farming God's way. This last year when we were in Kenya, it produced 3 times as much corn as the plot on the right. The same seed was planted, the same amount of rainfall fell on these 2 plots of land. The dramatic difference is just this was a no-till agricultural method that left a layer of mulch on the surface of the soil. I don't have time to get into all the details, but it's showing dramatic changes. And a farmer who believes he can never do anything to improve his crop productivity, all of a sudden sees there's something that we can do. So, in conclusion, with God in the center of our perspective, with God in the center of our worldview, there is hope for the hungry and for the rest of His creation. Kenya, most of the people in Kenya are farmers, but there's an awful lot of Kenyans that are in the tourism industry. People come from all around the world to marvel at the beauty of God's creation as seen in Kenya. And a lot of people have jobs there. So if we keep the wildlife populations healthy, people will continue to enjoy good jobs from that wildlife. In closing, what would I posit as an example of a farmer whose mind has been changed and transformed by a biblical worldview? What would a prayer look like in the mind of this farmer? Lord, I want to honor you today as I work this land which you have entrusted to my care. Give me wisdom as I strive to make this part of your creation even more bountiful. The parable of the talents, right? Make it even more bountiful. Enable me to enrich this land for my family, for your creatures, and for future generations. See how he's loving his neighbor? See how he's incorporating the entire creation as he thinks about his task as a farmer? And lastly, teach me how to share the love of Christ in both word and deed. So, that is my short course on a biblical worldview of creation stewardship that kind of summarizes some of the ideas and concepts that we are trying to teach through our ministry in Kenya.